All right, y'all. I have a special guest here with us today. Esther Jenkins is my shamanic teacher, and she's here to share with us some information about the sacred science of Huna. Welcome, Esther.
Thank you, Giana. I am
Yay!
so glad to be here and the opportunity to do this and share my knowledge. I've been teaching for God knows how many years. It would scare you if I told your public. But in the work that I've done, I found finally everything starting to come together, and that's really exciting. So I started working in the 1960s with my first teacher, and actually that's where I was introduced to Huna.
Mm-hmm.
And we did work with that concept for quite a long time. But at the time, I really wasn't capable of completely understanding what that was about. And I don't even know that my teacher was, because the concept is a little difficult for people to really totally integrate. But recently, Huna has become very exciting again, and apparently people are interested in it. So I looked at it again and realized I had integrated a lot of the information in the work I did, the shamanic work I did, which is primarily Andean shamanism from Peru.
Mm-hmm.
So doing, I realized that I had actually lost some of the information.
Mm-hmm.
And the really important thing is what I lost will really add a lot of empowerment to the work, which is primarily because shamanic work is a lot about soul retrieval.
Right.
And so the real connection between Huna and the Andean teachings is the soul retrieval aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So let me talk a little bit about, and interrupt me anytime you like.
I'm going to interrupt you right now just to say, I forgot to say this at the beginning. It was very interesting as I was sort of prepping for our talk. For the an hour and a half before we were supposed to have the call, the spirits got really loud and they were like, "We're coming," and I was like, "Oh, that's right, I forgot." We were talking about magic and
well,
Esther
all I
and
know is that's been happening to me on a regular basis. When they hit ground or hit town, they started really pushing buttons to get me to look into this information. And they wouldn't let me alone for days. So it's been like 3 weeks of constant, downloading information and gathering information. So I have lots of information. So what I discovered was that the whole idea that we have a responsibility to do soul retrieval is much more important than I realized.
Oh.
Because, and I'm going to talk a little now about the actual essence of. Now, this is Max Freedom Long's version. I have to say, the kahunas or hunas, or those studying and teaching Huna in Hawaii, if they're doing it from the traditional point of view of the latter day hunas, then they're not happy with this idea because they've lost it, basically. They lost that understanding. But honestly, the Hawaiian Islands were inundated with outsiders on at least 2 or 3 different occasions, and they wiped out the teachings repeatedly. So what they have on the islands today is old, but it isn't the original. And of course, I suppose I'd get a lot of flack for that, but I'll just go that way. Max Long was the one who discovered more of the real secret teachings through studying their language. And he found that there were many different meanings, even to one word. It had different aspects. And he came up with this concept of the ancient teachings prior to the common era, so to speak, going back thousands of years now. There is some evidence that the Hawaiian Islands may be the remnant of that continent called Lemuria. And so these ancient teachings actually might have come from Egypt. And then, of course, they were distorted over the years. This happens to every tradition. But this he felt was the real essential essence. And in that, they talk about man as being 2 souls and a spirit. The idea right away is that we're not one person. We, the conscious self, are what they call the middle self. And the low self is a much more, you would say, a younger soul. Doesn't that sound like our inner child?
Right.
who is attempting to grow into somebody like us, a conscious self or a high self, a middle self. And that each of these, and the third component is actually an ascended part of that, of this trinity.
Mm-hmm.
That it is that's called the high self, and the word is Amakua in Hawaiian, where we are the Uhani, the middle self, and the low self is the Unahipili. But low and high and middle are not, doesn't tell you that they're better than.
Right.
They're just different levels of consciousness. And so the middle self is responsible to bring up and heal the low self. And the low self is the one that connects to the high self. And that's the other tricky part. Because in order to connect to the high self, the child has to feel worthy.
Yep. Yeah, that makes complete sense, actually, right?
Okay. So when you realize you're sending your prayers to the low self to make contact with the high self, and the low self doesn't feel worthy, a lot of times your prayers don't get answered, but not because you're not worthy. That's just part of the
story. Yeah. Well, I like that.
Blew my mind there. When I recognized the difference between, and there is another aspect. You can make direct contact with the high self, but it's not a prayer situation. It is an interface. Then you receive direct energetic connection, and it's called the rain from heaven. And it's when you feel your whole body being enlightened, a sense of illumination. And actually there is a sense when you do the practice, which I teach in the workshop, you actually feel that rain from heaven.
Oh, wow.
Which is just amazing. It's like the best caffeine high you ever had.
It's like your inner child is the trap door to illumination. Sort of like with the
with high self.
Right.
It's not that you can't, but it's not prayer. It's when you pray or call on your high self to bring something to you that you feel you want to create in your life.
But you don't think
that's when you have to go through the low self. So experiment. Self-experiments. And the experiment was I was going through a tremendously difficult health period, as you know. Shingles, then I had an operation on my knee, and then all the drugs I had to take just decimated my immune system. I was so tired I could barely get through a day, never mind put two ideas together. And I was struggling for 6 months. I did the prayer envisioning the health I wanted, and 24 hours later, my life turned completely 360.
Wow.
Hours.
Wow.
And it got better and better till I thought I hit a plateau where I am fully energized all day long until I'm ready to go to bed, and I sleep like a rock.
Oh, nice.
I was doing none of that prior to this. So to me, that proved the efficacy of this concept or this idea. So that's the basics. And then
I love it. I love many aspects of this story. A major aspect I kind of want to come back to really quickly was the idea that the spirits hounded you, or like were relentless with making you look at the information, gather the information, process the information, and integrate the information. This is something that a lot of people miss when it comes to the magical lifestyle or the shamanic lifestyle or anything that is in that tradition, is that you have to interact with spirits all the time, and they will say, hey, we're going to take you down this road now. You ready? And you're like, what? Or what?
True. I mean, I had books on my shelf that literally had been there for 40 years, and I hadn't opened them.
Yeah.
And they were sitting there waiting for me. So
and they had all the information.
to the shelf, it goes, you don't have to get any books online. They're right here. So I started reading. So with that,
guided,
I began to download the missing pieces, and now I will integrate it with our teachings and with the healing work I do. I think I realized that soul retrieval has to be in place in the beginning of the shamanic work.
Mm-hmm.
So I require my students to do a session or two with me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to add all this other information so they can become more effective in their prayers, more effective in their healing work.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's a win-win.
Yeah, and I mean, I found that in my practice too, that um, even just in my practice in learning from you, that the integration of soul retrieval changed my life dramatically and helped me to learn better. And I found that the students who I've taught who come for soul retrieval have a capacity to learn better.
Uh-huh.
So definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
No,
I kind of wanted to go
great.
back to, you were saying you had a new understanding of why it is like a duty to, like a calling or a duty, or why it is like almost mandatory to do soul retrieval. Like, can you expand upon that a little bit
Yeah,
further?
that's what I didn't mention. If in this triplicity of a low self, a middle self, and a high self, each one is working to graduate to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of the mystery school version.
Okay.
In the mystery school, you're required to learn so you can become a teacher and begin to share the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the basic idea. Your job as the middle self is to bring up the low self to become a middle self.
Mm-hmm.
You can become a high self.
Okay.
So you then draw in a new low self, and this goes on.
I
So
don't,
there
okay, I
is,
don't understand that. Explain.
okay, let me explain.
You
In
draw
the
in a new low
beginning,
self?
we were in the primitive state. Our
Mm-hmm.
brain was minimal.
Mm-hmm.
That is, our brain has actually evolved.
Mm-hmm.
We had what they call a reptilian brain
Mm-hmm.
in the early stages when we were still in the animal version.
Got it.
When we became human, we
Mm-hmm.
developed a mammalian brain. So the brain evolved and grew a new segment.
Mm-hmm.
When we raised our consciousness to the level we have now, we grew a neocortex,
Mm-hmm.
is the gateway to the high self.
Got it.
So our evolvement in a physical form
Mm-hmm.
goes to the point where we graduate from a middle self to a high self. Then we enter the rainbow body or the light body, which is the Andean tradition.
Right.
We are evolving in this new light body, or let's say evolved light body.
Mm-hmm.
Join the whole host of high bodies or high selves.
Mm-hmm.
They're called the Poe Aumakua, but we call them the host of high selves in the shamanic work.
Okay.
So we are then privy
Mm-hmm.
to all of the knowledge and wisdom of these high selves.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there are higher selves to
Mm-hmm.
be out of that.
So
Our high
then, so
self
like
goes
when you get a new lower self, that's because we're constantly evolving.
on.
Okay.
That's it. That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how that will look in 2,000 million years, I don't know. But right now,
Mm-hmm.
that's the job. So our job is to not suppress everything,
Mm-hmm.
all the pain, the wounds, and the anger. Our job is to heal it.
Mm-hmm.
It can evolve.
Oh, so
Because
it's oh,
stop.
in order to enter into the new shift of consciousness, we need to help everybody heal. People need to heal. We need to help heal, and people need to pursue their healing in order to
Right.
evolve to the next level.
Exactly. You got it.
I'm on board.
Okay. So basically there's a lot more to it. It's how do you train your low self? That's
Mm-hmm.
part of the practice. And how do you feed it? Because you have to feed it. And it's true, the body needs food,
Mm-hmm.
but what the low self needs to evolve is air, breath. So breathing is what feeds the low self. And
That's
if you can,
interesting.
and if you download through some simple breathing techniques,
Mm-hmm.
this air, you can ask them to store it.
Mm.
That is called at that level mana. That's
Mm-hmm.
the name of the energy of the low self, mana. We at the middle self have mana.
Mm.
That means we have double
Okay.
the
Okay.
vibration.
I was like, I was
And
going to
mana
argue with the
mana
definition of mana, but now I'm
trumps
on board. Okay.
mana trumps mana. In other words, if
Mm-hmm.
we assert
Mm-hmm.
our intention and our focus with the low self,
Mm-hmm.
can change their understanding, awareness, and what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you change the habits they formed
Mhm.
and the addictions,
Mhm.
by imposing your will and intention in
Mhm.
a kind way.
Mhm.
Train them anew,
Mhm.
and then you convert them. They will convert.
So how is this differing from the Peruvian Caro shamanic tradition of soul retrieval?
Well, remember,
Mhm.
the Caro, actually, their indigenous way of helping someone do soul retrieval, at least one of them, is to take the clothing of that person, wrap it up into a doll shape,
Mhm.
and have them nurture it for the next 2 days.
Right.
Now, what else they tell them and what else they do is a little bit of a mystery, because we
Oh.
can't follow them around. What Alberto did
Mhm.
was create the idea of four-chamber soul retrieval. And
Mhm.
I'm not sure where that came from his background, but
Mhm.
it really doesn't matter. It's a very powerful technique.
Mhm.
I developed was inner child work,
Mhm.
makes it more consistent and everyday. It
Mhm.
isn't a one-time event. Not that four-chamber soul retrieval necessarily is a one-time event.
Mhm.
This becomes very personal, but it's more based on the indigenous Andean tradition of nurturing and reparenting the child.
Right.
Uh, I would have to talk to them in Quechua to share my knowledge to see how deeply what I do is really what they do too, but
Mm.
we can't figure it out.
No,
I
yeah,
don't.
I mean, neither here nor there in the sense that I know that your shamanic healing works. Like,
Yeah, that's.
so I mean, I feel
Oh,
like you learn a basic technique and then spirit will guide you and change it.
exactly. And that's what
So,
happened basically.
right. And what I guess what I'm trying to do is like, how does the Huna tradition that you're talking about differ from the soul retrieval tradition? Because they're sounding very similar.
Oh
And you
no,
said they
they're
come
identical,
together.
really. Let
What?
me tell you, I'm reading the book and they say you have to be kind
Mm-hmm.
to your child, to your
Mm.
inner, to your low self.
Uh-huh.
You have to take care of it, you have to nurture it.
Uh-huh.
That. It's not any different.
All right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what
It
I'm
isn't.
saying.
When I saw that in writing, I mean, because I hadn't picked up a Huna book,
Right.
uh, you use hypnotic techniques with them, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Teach them by repetition,
Mm-hmm.
reinforcement, by consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound a whole lot different than what we've been told in psychology?
Mm-mm.
Not really.
No, right. So you are you. I this is a concept I've been sort of playing around with my head for a little while. The idea of being a bridge person, but
Yeah.
being a bridge person not only between this world and the other world, but between different traditions,
Hmm.
bridging them together and bringing all the different people of the traditions and the practices kind of together, like not making them the same, but making them integrated in a way that bridges all the
Where you
differences.
get the best of each, of
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
that way. Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's. I'm totally involved with that, and also believe that.
Hmm.
And so, and I've seen that all of the traditions, the real indigenous traditions, are very similar.
Right, that's what
Almost
I've seen too.
words. There are words sometimes that are similar. Um, if we listen to the story of Lemuria,
Hmm.
happens that even before it sank, they were already leaving the island, going off to various other continents to teach.
Hmm.
So the basic teachings went to the other continents early on.
Hmm.
When the continent of Lemuria sunk,
Hmm.
by that time there were emissaries everywhere.
Hmm.
The Americas, Africa, India, China, Japan, everywhere. So the essential essence of all these ancient traditions are founded on really the same principles,
Hmm.
and which just tells me that those are the essential mystery teachings that
Right,
we've always wanted. Well, we
right.
have them.
If
We
you find
have them.
them, if it's a common denominator
Yeah,
in every tradition, then it is the seed of the mystery of
yeah.
all that is. Speaking of Lemuria, and not really, but kind of, I had this experience the other night where a friend of ours gave me a book. I'm not gonna say her name because I don't know if she's agreed to have her name on the YouTube.
Thingy ding.
But I got this book. It's by Doreen Virtue. It's Archangels, Ascended Masters. Anyway, the other day I was flipping through it. I was like, "Who wants to work with me tonight?" And El Moria, right?
Okay.
Popped up, and I don't know anything about him, but he showed up real quick, and he's part of the I Am teachings. I don't know if I can see El Moria.
Not unless I put on those ugly glasses.
It's all good. It's okay. It's all good. I want to say that he might have been connected to some of the Lemurian teachings, but maybe I'm making that up. I mean, with the name, and I was like,
okay, why do you think? Why do you think?
Right. This is all coming together very interesting.
Yeah. So what did you read that made you think that about him?
Well, his name.
Okay. All right.
Moria. I was like, Lemuria? El Moria.
Doesn't sound Spanish.
Right. He's from India, supposedly. He's part of the I Am teachings. I don't know. It was like I was doing something like later the next day.
Well, did you read anything about him?
I don't remember. I was just going to skim through it right now. But as I skimmed, I didn't see anything in particular.
What's the opening sentence about him?
Is a new ascended master. First recorded by
Doreen, who it's,
What?
New at which time, whenever the book was written?
1880s.
Yeah, there you go.
El Moria is new because Madame Blavatsky talked about him in the 1880s, and then he was repopularized in the 1960s.
There you go. Guess why I know him?
Oh.
That's when I started my teachings.
Oh, all right. Just time in India.
Doreen is just giving you a background.
Yeah.
Not so much any channeling directly from El Moria.
No, I did, but I did the channeling. Like I opened it up and then I just talked to him and then he showed up. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he's connected with Lemuria, but his name the next day.
Interesting. This is another interesting caveat. Mm-hmm. In one of the books, actually this one right here, which is an excellent book, The Heart of Huna.
Oh yeah.
This is, and this the author is, oh God, here goes the glasses. Okay. Yeah, this is an older book, but it's really good. Laura Kealoha Yardley, and you can get this online. Mm-hmm. This is excellent because it's Daddy Bray is talked about in here as well as Max Freedom Long, and she does a beautiful job of showing both of these aspects, which I think is an advantage because it's all part of the tradition, and she doesn't make it adversarial in any way. Where there are people right now who are making it very adversarial. Oh, he didn't have anything to do with it, or the. I think it's sad because the teachings, particularly the essence of what I mentioned, is very valuable and very powerful.
I've noticed that a lot as well. There is a dialogue of like anger and exclusion surrounding various spiritual traditions and arguments of authenticity, which seem to detract from the understanding and reality that all of these are geared towards healing. And if we are healing, then that's the importance.
That I absolutely agree. And I've always felt this way, and I've done just what you've done. I've bridged all the teachers and the teachings that I've had and brought them all together, and I find that the most effective thing. And I don't, in other words, I'm not exclusionary, I'm inclusionary.
Right.
That's my motto, to be inclusive.
Right.
So that's proven to be the best thing. So far as the work goes, so far as how I'm going to integrate it into the Andean teachings, I'm going to add it in right away so that they begin to recognize the necessity of connecting to their low self and doing the reparenting work. Mm-hmm. I think that will aid in their, like you said, right away. When they start working with the teachings, it gets easier and easier because they get clearer and clearer. They're not inundated with those old wounds and those old stories.
Right.
Now that's where there's an absolute crossover between the Andean teachings and uh, the Huna teachings and the
Mm-hmm.
teachings I've been, because they talk about this as well.
Mm-hmm.
That it's important to um, to do soul retrieval, that's an indigenous part of the work. And if you think about it, they talk about those three centers all the time. They
Mm-hmm.
talk about the Yankai, the Munai, and the Yachai,
Mm-hmm.
the seat of love of service at work and service
Mm-hmm.
in the belly, and the seat of unconditional love in the heart,
Mm-hmm.
and the seat of wisdom in the third eye.
Mm-hmm.
And then again the three worlds, the
Right.
Uhu Pacha, the Ke Pacha, and the Hanan Pacha or Hanak Pacha. So that concept of three levels is
Mm-hmm.
like right there.
Right. You know, it's
And
funny too. It's just popping into my head right now. I have a bunch of books by Raven Grimassi. So Italian witchcraft or Wicca.
yeah.
Um, he's got this one drawing that has a magical practitioner with the three centers, with the energy coming from the lower, the middle, the upper, and how you're
Oh,
interacting.
cool.
And I was
Oh,
like, yeah,
wonderful.
there it is. It's in all the mystery traditions.
And the interesting thing is, because I thought of you when I was teaching this, was because they decimated all of these religions that had this information.
Mm-hmm.
The early Hawaiian tradition, the kahunas of long time ago, beyond the kahunas of more recent,
Mm-hmm.
the Wicca
Mm-hmm.
in Europe, that was decimated,
Mm-hmm.
right? Any time there was anything that smacked of
Mm-hmm.
self-empowerment,
Mm-hmm.
and you being able to connect directly to spirit without using the church or whatever
Mm-hmm.
there,
Mm-hmm.
they were wiped out.
Okay, but I have an argument for that, though. I would say they were wiped out, aka assimilated into a Catholic uh,
Oh,
a
sure.
mask, but the old practices still continued. So my Nana had been trained or had started to be trained by her aunts
Mm-hmm.
um, in the old tradition. Now, my Nana didn't end up finishing the training. um, but for other reasons. But the knowledge was still there. So it wasn't decimated. And I would say in a
Well,
lot of
I'll
these
tell you why I
traditions, it's
say that.
not decimated. Yeah.
Let me tell you why I say that. It was decimated at the root level so that the individual, the ordinary individual, lost use or
Ah,
lost connection to it.
got it. So, like your everyday individual in the society loses connection, but the magical practitioners hold that knowledge.
They do, but they use it towards their own ends, unfortunately, for the
Mm-hmm.
purpose, the magic
Uh-huh.
and the pomp, the ceremony
Uh-huh.
is very, very, what's the word? First of all, it's very popular.
Uh-huh.
People love it, and it's very it subtle. Well, what's the word? It draws you in. I
Mm.
can't. It draws you in. People love to do ceremony,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Ritual,
love
yeah.
to be a part of ritual and
Mm-hmm.
ceremony. But the problem is it's external.
Mm-hmm.
It's external because it has to be given by the priest,
Mm-hmm.
whoever that person is that takes that role.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be the intermediary to give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
Forgotten that it's right there.
Sorry, my
Is
cat.
that cat
Yeah, yes.
acting out? The cat,
She's she's
the
climbing
Wicca
through my closet.
cat,
Okay, she's done. No,
trying to
sorry.
be a part of the process. Animals are like that. However, I've trained mine very well. Of
Uh-huh,
course,
I know, I know. You
dogs,
have good control. I know.
dogs, dogs do bond. Um, see what happens then is, in order for me to get that magic in my life, I have to go to the priest.
hmm But okay, so I'm gonna argue. I'm gonna argue this. So like, there's an old saying that Haiti is 80% Catholic, 20% Protestant, and 100% Voodoo, because the old traditions are still practiced, but they can't practice like out loud. So they
Uh-huh.
do it under the guise of like in the meaning you have statuary or candles or other like words and names that you use that follow the Catholic paradigm.
Yeah.
But in actuality, the old knowledge and the old traditions are still being utilized. So I would say many times it was not decimated, and that's how the resurgence came about, was
That
that
could
old
be.
knowledge. I think even Raven Grimassi claims to have been trained by his grandmother. So a lot of the
Well, there are pockets, of course, that do that.
Mhm.
It's just that the general public kind of
Right,
loses
and yeah,
that
and I would totally agree. The general
connection.
public, yes, does not have the same connection.
Well,
And
and the fact
interestingly,
is, yeah,
that has to do with the differentiation, like in shamanic traditions before Western culture takeover, I guess. Um, there were types of religious traditions like totemism, etc., where within the society, religion hadn't differentiated from knowledge. But as knowledge and religion continued and separated, you had the differentiation, and so only the carriers of religion kept the knowledge, but the lay people didn't necessarily.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's kind of my point.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, kind of my point. Because people come to us now who've been brought up in the Catholic Church or other churches, and they don't have any sense of empowerment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
They have lost their sense of their connection, and really, the important part is that the connection is that they've lost is to Mother Earth.
mm-hmm,
Earth is got a short shrift, so to speak, because we became mechanized, we became
mm-hmm,
technologically advanced, and we forgot our feet.
mm-hmm,
We forgot we're walking on a planet and that we depend on that Earth for our food. And if it goes kind of berserk,
mm-hmm,
with hurricanes and so on, and inundated by floods, we're
mm-hmm,
at its mercy.
mm-hmm,
And that puts humans in a very precarious position.
mm-hmm.
So they began to placate the gods of thunder, lightning, rain, and so on in order to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Effective. That produced superstition, unfortunately.
Oh gosh. But I've interacted with the deities of thunder and lightning and
Well, yes, to understand that there is a being
hmm
connected to that
hmm
is not a bad idea.
Right.
But when one feels helpless
Mm.
with that, then it becomes problematic. And then you use strange and weird things to curry their favor.
Got it.
That's where human sacrifice comes in and so on and so forth.
Right.
So when things get distorted, a perfectly good teaching
Uh-huh.
gets a bad rap.
Yeah.
And separating superstition
hmm
out of the tradition and going directly to the heart of the power of the tradition and
hmm
literally the heart,
hmm
that brings about a transformation.
hmm
I believe that's what's happening now.
Oh, okay.
Because our intellect, we as the middle self have
hmm
expanded to the point where we can see just over the horizon of the high self. We're beginning to get connected to that energy which sees the big picture.
hmm I
And
like
so
it.
then we connect heaven and earth and we become that bridge person. I lost you. Where did you? Oh, there you are. Oh, the cat. Now I'm
This
going to bring my
person
dog
is
and it will
making
be a
all
fight
kinds of noise. All right,
because of the
sorry about
energy.
yeah,
That's
yeah. Yeah,
they're
she likes my attention.
perfect barometers for energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is kind of the bigger picture.
Awesome.
Excited to,
Anything else that you would like to share?
well, only to say that we have classes. We
Uh-huh.
teach
Oh, yeah, yeah,
shamanic work, and we're having a new shamanic series starting in March.
yeah. hmm
They can go to my website. I don't have the date up there, but I have the March part, and they can see the classes that we have. And there'll be new classes coming up on a regular basis. And that's it.
Awesome. School for the Shamanic Arts, Esther
.com.
Jenkins.
Yeah.
I will link it up for you.
Yeah, and I have a Facebook page for the school as well.
Awesome. And
We
I'll
do
link that up
have
as well.
some new things coming next year that we started this year called Magic by Moonlight.
hmm
There's where we have classes, or they're a night event for about 3 hours. They're open to everybody, and it's all by donation. And I believe we're going to have a wonderful individual. I won't use her name right now because I have it official, but I haven't put it out yet. She'll be teaching on the alien connection.
Cool.
All of the interest. She's a fabulous teacher, and she's going to come and teach. And it'll be like the second Saturday of the month.
Awesome. Cool. Well, then, It was a pleasure to talk with you, and I definitely recommend to all my viewers you should check out Esther Jenkins. I studied with her for a long period of time and still keep in contact. She is a beautiful teacher and with a beautiful soul and a powerful spirit that will help you get your healing done. So thank you so much for joining us,
Giana,
Esther.
thank you, dear.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Wonderful.
And yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thank you.